and more than 50% of all the coal burned on the planet is burned by China. That is what fuels their economy, and they dwarf us. If we shut all of our coal plants off, it would make absolutely no change in the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, but it would decimate our economy and it would decimate our government. And we would probably all need to learn how to speak Chinese.
This is Joseph Bonspakowski, the editor and technical producer for Climate Debrief. This episode is the second half of Angela's interview with Richard Storm. I recommend that you watch our previous episode linked in the description for further context and more insight.
Getting back to something you said earlier regarding public indoctrination and misguided politicians, what steps can we take to reverse this crisis and restore coal's vital role?
I've written letters to the editor and I've given public presentations, and I've put posts on Nextdoor and social media about the importance of coal. And I am amazed at the pushback that I get, that my unscientific analysis of the American public is there's about 3% of the people like us that have a good grasp on the understanding of where electricity comes from. What the public has been indoctrinated on is indoctrinated that you can replace coal plants with wind, and clean solar. I mean, there's even people from Princeton, from Stanford, from MIT that have published papers that have said, we can replace all the fossil generation and all the nuclear generation with windmills and solar panels. And we can. And the places where it has been tried, it hasn't worked. I have a couple family members that are teachers, and they've showed me the textbooks for 5th grade and for junior high school where they promote green power and they talk about the evils of fossil fuels. And what we have is extremist NGOs like the Southern Environmental Law Center. They quote a Harvard study that says a gas plant at Kennedy's is going to harm the health of South Carolinians. And what we're faced with is escalation on a large scale of electric rates that is going to deindustrialize South Carolina if we stay on the path that we are. But a lot of the people in South Carolina believe, including the legislature, they believe that wind and solar and batteries can produce competitive with the rest of America and compete with China, and that's the path that they're on. But when you get down to a cold day in winter, well, like today's pretty cold, there's probably 70% coal power that's got my lights on and power in this computer. And if we were to take that power away, there'd be rolling blackouts.
The IRPs for these utilities show uncertainty in capacity after phasing out coal. How does this highlight the risks of exiting coal without reliable alternatives?
Angela, it is unbelievable that people like this particular slide represents, sane engineers, really, really smart people would actually plan something like this. Let me explain these slides. The one with all the orange in it is the Santee Cooper plan. The orange bars represent coal capacity. The black single line at the top represents the expected growth to 2040. And as you see, the demand growth grows from about 6,000 megawatts to just short of 9,000 megawatts by 2040. The IRP means Integrated Resource Plan. That means they show the resources in generating capacity to meet the expected demand in the future and how they're going to do that by fuels. So what they show, for example, Santee Cooper on the left shows, well, they're going to have coal for about 3,000 megawatts or so, and they're going to have some hydropower, a couple hundred megawatts. They're going to have some purchased power in the purple. They're going to have some nuclear. They own a third of the Summer Unit Number 1 nuclear plant. That's about 300 megawatts. And they have purchased power from the neighbors. And a later IRP that they have power purchase agreements with Duke and with Southern Company to bring power into South Carolina out of state. And that is up to about 2030, I think, those contracts, if I read them right. So after 2030, the chart on the right is Duke Energy Carolinas, and what they show in gray at the bottom is coal, where they show about 10,000 megawatts of coal power generation in 2024, and then it goes to zero by 2036. So that's a plan to exit coal. They show at the top the demand going up, and then they show all other resources like gas turbine, hydropower, pump storage, solar, wind, what have you, in the light blue. And then they show in the magenta firm resource gap, like not sure where the power is going to come from. Maybe we'll buy it from our neighbors. But anyway, they show the demand higher than the proven resources. So what it actually shows is plans to ration power to the residents. And the reason I picked these two IRP screenshots is here's two neighboring utilities that show they're going to buy power from the neighbors, and both neighbors are planning on exiting coal. And it looks like we're going to be okay. And I have talked to my state legislator, my state senator, and who's above average in energy IQ. I said, Tom, how about the maintenance dollars? There's a lot of equipment, a lot of maintenance dollars that have to be spent on a planned basis to keep a coal plant capable of 90% capacity factor. That's what they used to be capable of. These days, they starve the plants for maintenance. A cold snap comes through, the plants break down, and they say, see, coal couldn't cut it after all, like happened in Texas in 2021 with Winter Storm Uri. They had a statewide blackout, and 240 people were killed, and it cost over $100 billion, according to the Texas Economic Commission. And that can happen to a wider area than just the state of Texas should another polar vortex come down and hit major parts of America and PJM interconnection in 2026. But anyway, this is the plans are to shut the coal plants down, and there is not a good path forward. And it's my prediction the next new coal plant that gets built in America will be built by a data center operator, because it takes an enormous amount of money, and the woke utility management doesn't have the stomach for building new coal plants.
Dick, your bar chart shows countries with over 30,000 renewables facing higher electricity costs relative to wages. How does this data emphasize coal's role in keeping power affordable and accessible?
You know, I hadn't thought about it before, but right in the middle of that chart is the country of Spain. And back when I was a young engineer, Foster Wheeler was selling a lot of coal-fired power plants in Spain. And Spain had very reliable electricity, reasonable cost. They had aluminum smelters. They had good reliability. You probably saw in the news I think it was this past spring, where they were bragging one week about being 100% renewables. And the next week, they had a countrywide blackout, major blackout. And they are much more than 30% renewables. And that means it's very unreliable. But any place that went above 30% renewables have an extreme cost. And that's just called a 7th grade high school science experiment, science project. You put a bunch of renewables in, you shut down the coal, electricity costs go high. There was a 180 megawatt coal-fired power plant in Oahu in Hawaii. Our guys at Storm Technologies worked there for years. AES operated that plant. And as the Honolulu newspaper said, our lowest cost of power is about to go away. And it did. Why did it go away? Just because the politicians said, we hate coal. So they shut down that reliable coal generating plant in Hawaii. It was shut down, not because it was unreliable, not because it was unsafe, just because they hated coal. Well, at that time, electricity costs were probably high, probably 15, 20 cents per kilowatt in Hawaii. Well, they shut it down. They shut down the coal plant, and they went 100% Green New Deal. And Hawaii, as you know, is in the lower latitudes. It gets a lot of sunshine. It has good, steady trade winds all the time. So it's a perfect place for wind and solar. They got wind and they have solar all the time. Well, they tried it. It didn't work. And so what do they do to keep the lights on? They're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. They can't build transmission lines to California or to Wyoming. So they are a real experiment in the Green New Deal because it's pure power on the island. Same deal on the Canary Islands. They can't cheat and bring power from Wyoming and call it imported power like California does. They get a lot of power in California from the Jim Bridger station in Wyoming, but they don't call it coal power. They call it imported. Hawaii is almost all renewables, but they don't tell you about all the diesel fuel that they burn. That's why their kilowatts cost 42 cents in Hawaii, is because most of the time the power is being generated by high-cost imported diesel fuel to the island of Hawaii. Now, where's that come from? It probably comes from China because they're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and it's going to be cheaper to get the diesel fuel from some Asian country than from California that doesn't like refineries anyway.
Visualizing U.S. coal use as a train circling the Earth twice, and China's 10 times that, how does this scale demonstrate coal's proven capacity for powering large economies reliably?
I love this picture. When you go out west, you can look at a whole train, a mile long, a unit train of 110 or 115 cars of coal, 10,000 or 11,000 tons of coal in a mile long train. A major coal power plant like the Roxborough generating station that I worked at one time, it would burn a couple of these trains a week. And I mean, it's enormous, the amount of energy that we use. But by the same token, on total primary energy use last year, coal represented less than 10% of America's total primary energy. I think it was 9%. About 100 quadrillion BTUs total was used. Coal provided about 9% of that primary energy. In 2009, when we were 45% coal-fired electricity powered, we used about 23 quadrillion BTUs, about 2.5 times as much as we did in 2024. We had reliable electricity. We had amongst the lowest cost electricity on the planet in America due to the affordable, reliable, dispatchable, storable coal. Life was good. And we have tried to self-sabotage this wonderful treasure. America is the Saudi Arabia of coal. Not only do we have a couple 100-year supply of coal, but our coal was the best quality coal in the world. I have friends in international plants that would love, if they could get it, to burn American coal. Not because it's American, but because it has lower ash, lower sulfur, it's NOx friendly, it's boiler friendly, and we have the highest quality coal and enormous reserves of it. And the dark forces that hate coal, in my view, hate America because it is such a black gold God-given resource that we should use. And we did use it well for 120 years or so. And then we got weird in Washington. And here we are self-sabotaging ourselves for no apparent reason.
Combining charts on global GDP and coal consumption, how does coal fuel China's economic dominance and provide reliable energy?
China likes to talk about renewable and solar. Mainly, I think they want to promote renewable and solar so that they can manufacture it and export it to the West. China has powered that manufacturing might with coal. And these charts represent a path of the energy consumption and GDP of most developed countries parallel each other. But you can just imagine China making nothing in the year 2000 as far as world capacity goes in aluminum and steel to being the world's largest aluminum and steel producer in 2024, 2025. They're still the largest and they're getting bigger. And they keep on building more coal plants. They're building new nuclear plants. They're building a lot of solar, but what keeps their lights on, what keeps their manufacturing at the lowest cost of anywhere in the world is coal power. And they burn in the magnitude of 10 times more than America, and more than 50% of all the coal burned on the planet is burned by China. That is what fuels their economy. That is what fuels their manufacturing base. And they dwarf us. If we shut all of our coal plants off, it would make absolutely no change in the CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere, but it would decimate our economy and it would decimate our government. And we would probably all need to learn how to speak Chinese.
Well, and it sounds like there's a lot of education that needs to be done. And that's exactly why the CO2 Coalition exists and why we have members like you. And in our conclusion, is there anything that you would like to address? And what would you say to your fellow Americans about energy use and coal?
America uses 100 quadrillion BTUs a year of total primary energy. The problem I have is most people that I would say that to in America wouldn't have a clue on what I just said. They wouldn't know what a BTU is. A BTU is 1 pound of water raised 1 degree Fahrenheit. And, go back to 7th grade science. What I would say to all Americans is that we have got to improve our energy IQ. We've got to get active in the schools. We've got to get active in the universities. And I think one of the biggest things we have to do is improve energy education. And since Mr. Trump and Mr. Wright have made some good policy changes favoring coal, favoring nuclear, favoring gas, there's no new coal plants that are being planned to be built at this moment. And it's all rhetoric and talk and policy. The people that would start a new coal plant are the people that have, in this capitalistic society, somebody has to have a couple $2 billion in capital to invest in a coal plant. And what we have to do is convince 300 million souls in our borders that coal is good and coal is not unhealthy. And I run up against a brick wall every time I try. That's why I accepted your invitation in the New York 2nd, because I feel it's important to get the word out, and the CO2 Coalition is doing as good a job as anybody on getting the facts out there. But there is misinformation, indoctrination on the evils of coal, but really there are policies against the best interests of America and all of Western civilization. Energy and a thriving economy go hand in hand, and the lowest cost, most reliable energy is going to fuel the GDP, lift people out of poverty, keep our high quality of life, and make life as we know it continue to be possible in the future.
I think there is this opinion that coal is dirty. You know, we hear there's a lot of pollution, but there's a lot of technology now that makes coal a lot cleaner. Is that correct?
God bless you. Thank you for bringing that up. What the left has done is they have equated coal being dirty because dirty in their eyes is CO2. We have taken care of the heavy metals. We have reduced the sulfur. We have eliminated the oxides of nitrogen. We have made a stack promote, what you see coming out of cooling towers is water vapor. But what the environmentalists have called coal dirty because of the CO2. A coal plant, a well-run, efficient coal plant will emit twice as much CO2 as a gas turbine combined cycle plant, about a ton of CO2 per megawatt. A gas turbine plant, combined cycle, highly efficient, will do about a half a ton an hour. So, they say that makes coal plants dirty. But I mean, as you get me excited and I breathe faster, I exhale CO2. And it's pretty gosh darn harmless. And, submarine crews live at 1,000 or 5,000 parts per million CO2. International Space Lab people live in 1,000 or 5,000 parts per million CO2. And it's not a health hazard. But the Obama administration on the endangerment finding deemed CO2 a health hazard. And then you have people like Harvard writing studies like I just saw where they talk about black lung. Black lung don't have anything to do with CO2. That's from silicosis from coal miners years ago. And we don't mine coal like that anymore. But anyway, they have demonized coal as a health hazard and being dirty. And 95% or more of the public has been successfully indoctrinated, and they believe that. And they're willing to have a death wish for America's economy because they believe that. It's a horrible indoctrination.
Thank you for watching. The Climate Debrief podcast is funded by listeners like you. If you enjoyed listening to this episode of Climate Debrief, please like, comment, and subscribe. We read all of your feedback. If you are interested in finding out more about the CO2 Coalition and its mission, visit our website at co2coalition.org. Our host and executive producer is Angela Wheeler. Production by Ethan Audie and Scott Wheeler. Technical production and editing by Joseph von Spakovsky.